Now, the government and Treasurer, of course, chose Friday to drop that ACCC report into the supermarkets. It did so perhaps to divert attention away from Tuesday's budget, a budget that promises little except to show the extent of the government's spending and the amount of tax it's taken out of workers' pockets, plus the $1 trillion of debt that'll be racked up over the next 10 years. But not all attention should be placed at the government's feet. The coalition, in a bid not to be wedged before the election, has rolled over and agreed to the government's $8.5 billion of Medicare bulk billing and extra doctors' visits, and close on $690 million for cheaper medicines under the Pharmaceuticals Benefits Scheme. Now, if they weren't in such big debt, these might be a reasonable thing for the nation as a whole. But the economy's barely moving, and debts just keep on mounting for the next generation. And for that, culpability has to be directed at both major parties. So let's bring in here the independent economist, Warren Hogan. Warren, always good to chat to you. This is a reality. There is no discipline, it seems to me, on spending from either side. There is no messaging from either side. Hey, we've got restraint. We understand about trying to balance out these budgets. We understand we've got to get this back into surplus in the future.
Yeah, and that's, of course, what we've been doing in this country for the last 30 years. And this government certainly isn't. And the spend from this government and Australian governments in the last 5 to 10 years has just been one way. And
you can't cut the coalition slack either on this.
Well, they were in before and they were spending big. And, of course, yes, they are matching them. I think that's the politics of being in opposition. Australian governments get kicked out at elections, they don't get elected in. So for the opposition, no matter who they are, they tend to not want to give a reason not to kick the government.
But OK, yeah, but Peter Dutton, Angus Taylor, will be firmly aware of what took place with Tony Abbott and Joe Hockey's first budget, with Matthias Cormann, it would be fair to say. When they tried the last budget in Australia that had any form of austerity, there was uproar from the business community, there was uproar from the community at large, and largely that spelt their doom, I guess.
It did. Well, it was a huge political cost those two individuals paid, although it did start 8-10 years of coalition government. So there is, of course, a rationale behind why you come in and have a look through things. And, of course, this government now, the ALP government that got in, said they were going to do that. And they were somewhat disciplined at the start, but it's just gone. And, of course, they're getting this extra tax take, the bracket creep, the income taxes, and they're spending it. And every other week there's a new spend happening.
OK, but they say, hang on, you know, and I hear the Treasurer say this, right? And when he says it, he's very convincing because he is a good salesman. Let's be honest about this. But the reality is that when he says this, he's going, if it weren't for us giving out cost of living relief, and if it weren't for us changing those tax cuts last year, you know, Australians would be much worse off. And remember that the coalition didn't support those things. He says it the whole time. But the fact of the matter is, these are debts on future generations. Debts at some stage that will have to be paid off. Somebody's got to take the hard decisions at some stage.
Well, that's right. And if you don't get ahead of it, we will have an economic crisis of some sort. We will be forced to deal with it, and we will not have the control that we would have if we were doing it ourselves.
So what you're saying is the lessons of, say, the 90s, the 80s and 90s, if you don't get some sort of control over your budget, that simply increases the risks that you don't have the buffers if ever there is a significant downturn in the future.
Yeah, and it's more than just the budget. It's the whole economic strategy, and it's what is happening in the economy. I believe this economy has changed fundamentally in the last 5 years, and I also believe that the government and many others do not understand that, and we're seeing things like this big government increase to provide cost of living support. When you don't spend money to deal with inflation, you raise interest rates. We don't want to have a recession. Well, is a mild recession now better than a bad recession? You know, we're not making the tough decisions. We're trying to get through as easily as possible. And the reality is, I think we are on a pathway to an economic crisis at the moment. Whether that's a severe recession and what the dimensions of it, I don't know. But we cannot keep going down this path where we have inflation. It might not be at the consumer level right now, but business costs are going up.
Yeah.
And so what's happening now is they're not passing on their costs because the consumer has been soft for the last 18 months, but their profitability is disappearing. And of course, they're going to stop investing, and some of them are failing.
And record numbers of small and medium-sized businesses failing right now.
The ASIC insolvency numbers are at record levels, although the insolvency rate's not. But the point is, this could get a lot worse. We don't even have to look beyond the productivity performance of this economy as a flashing red light that this is not going the right way. And I hear it from business every week that this is not sustainable.
Okay, so a lot of those businesses that we've talked about, and this has been a common theme on this program over a long time, are simply picking up their assets and moving to the United States in particular, because they can get a bigger bang for those dollars in America. So the whole point about this is that if you have productive businesses leaving the country and going somewhere else, what do you got left here in Australia?
Well, that's right. I mean, that's largely the domain of bigger business and some bigger medium businesses. And of course, they're going to look at every option for their survivability or their profitability. We have to get our house in order. So our energy market is a problem. Our industrial relations and our labour costs are a problem for every industry, from mining through to hospitality. So at the moment, we do not have a government that looks like they are addressing these issues. The economic trends show that we are not making any headway. And of course, if we don't get on with it, and of course, dealing with the budget going into deficit and spending growing is a part of that. But if we don't get on top of it, the economy will shift.
So what are you looking for in Tuesday's budget? Of course, the Treasurer is going to do a great sell job. That's what he does. He talks a good game. The question is, do the numbers actually justify that?
Yeah, so the first thing will be straight up, how much extra money have they got because employment's been stronger, wages have been stronger, and then did they just spend all that? Ahead of an election, you'd assume they will. How much spending are they going to do? Because that's what we can't do. We can't just keep spending this money. We've got to look at ways to cut the tax burden. So, look, I think the key issue is going to be the amount of spend there is. If it's about $10 billion over the next year or so, 18 months, that's not the end of the world. But any more than that, as you're heading up towards 1% of GDP, that's a problem.
I'll tell you what, Warren Hogan, always great to have you in the program. We'll find out about that on Tuesday when we're at the budget. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ross.